Hello everyone who's listening here on YouTube. I'm ending the Kafka on the Shore series here in chapter 10. I've covered roughly 20% of the book, and if you want to finish reading it, I'll leave the link to the digital version in the description. Enjoy the book. Oh, and let me know in the comments if you have any book suggestions. Chapter 8. U.S. Army Intelligence Section, MIS. Report dated May 12, 1946. Title: Report on the Rice Bowl Hill Incident, 1944. Document number PTYX 722-8936745. The following is a taped interview with Dr. Shigenori Tsukuyama, professor in the Department of Psychiatry in the School of Medicine, Tokyo Imperial University, which took place over a 3-hour span at the GHQ at the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers. Documentations related to the interview can be accessed using application number PTYX 722SQ273-291. Note: documents 271 and 278 are missing. Impressions of the interviewer: Lieutenant Robert O'Connor. Professor Tsukuyama was quite calm and relaxed throughout the interview, as one might expect of an expert of his caliber. He's one of the leading psychiatrists in Japan and has published a number of outstanding books on the subject. Unlike most Japanese, he avoids vague statements, drawing a sharp distinction between facts and conjecture. Before the war, he was an exchange scholar at Stanford and is quite fluent in English. He's surely well liked and respected by many. We were ordered by the military to immediately undertake an examination of the children in question. It was the middle of November 1944. It was quite unusual for us to receive requests or orders from the military. The military, of course, had its own extensive medical branch, and being a self-contained entity that put a high priority on secrecy, they usually preferred to handle matters internally, apart from the rare times when they needed a special knowledge or techniques that only outside researchers or physicians had. They seldom appealed to civilian doctors or researchers. Thus, when they broached this, we immediately surmised that something extraordinary had occurred. Frankly, I didn't like to work under military directions. In most cases, their goals were strictly utilitarian, with no interest in pursuing truth in an academic sense, only arriving at conclusions that accorded with their preconceptions. They weren't the type of people swayed by logic. But it was wartime, and we couldn't very well say no. We had to keep quiet and do exactly as we were told. We've been continuing our research despite the American air raids. Most of the undergrads and grad students, though, had been drafted. Students in psychiatry weren't exempt for the draft, unfortunately. When the order came from the military, we dropped everything and took a train to name Delirit in Yamanashi Prefecture. There were 3 of us, myself, and a colleague from the psychiatry department, as well as a research physician from the Department of Neurosurgery with whom we'd been conducting research. As soon as we got there, they warned us that what they were about to reveal was a military secret we could never divulge. Then they told us about the incident that had occurred at the beginning of the month. How 16 school children had lost consciousness in the hills and 15 of them had regained consciousness thereafter, with no memory of what had taken place. One boy, they told us, hadn't regained consciousness and was still in the military hospital in Tokyo. The military doctor who had examined the children right after the incident, an internal medicine specialist named Major Tayama, gave us detailed explanation about what had transpired. Many army doctors are more like bureaucrats concerned with protecting their own little preserve than with medicine, but fortunately, Major Tayama wasn't one of them. He was honest and straightforward, and obviously a talented physician. He never tried to use the fact that we were civilians to lord it over us or conceal anything from us, as some might do. He provided all the details we needed, in a very professional manner, and showed us medical records that had been kept on the children. He wanted to get to the bottom of this as much as anybody. We were all quite impressed by him. The most important fact we gleaned from the records was that, medically speaking, the incident had caused no lasting impact on the children, from right after the event to the present day. The examinations and tests consistently indicated no internal or external abnormalities. The children were leading healthy lives, just as they had before the incident. Detailed examinations revealed that several of the children had parasites, but nothing out of the ordinary. Otherwise, they were completely asymptomatic. No headaches, nausea, pain, loss of appetite, insomnia, listlessness, diarrhea, nightmares, nothing. The one notable thing was that the 2-hour span during which the children had been unconscious in the hills was erased from their memory, as if that part had been extracted in total. Rather than a memory loss, it was more memory lack. These aren't medical terms, and I'm using them for the sake of convenience, but there's a big difference between loss and lack. I suppose it's like, well, imagine a train steaming down a track. The freight has disappeared from one of the cars. A car that's empty inside. That's loss. When the whole car itself has vanished, that's lack. We discussed the possibility that the children had breathed in poison gas. Dr. Toyama said that naturally they would consider this, but that's why the military is involved, he told us. But it seems a remote possibility. He then told us, now this is a military secret, so you can't tell anyone. The army is definitely developing poison gas or biological weapons, but this is carried out mainly by a special unit on the Chinese mainland, not in Japan itself. It's too dangerous a project to attempt in a place as densely populated as Japan. I can't tell you whether or not these sorts of weapons are stored anywhere in Japan, though I can assure you, most definitely, that they're not kept anywhere in Yamanashi Prefecture. So he categorically denied that special weapons, including poison gas, were being stored in the prefecture? Correct. He was very clear about that. We basically had no choice except to believe him, but he sounded believable. We also concluded that it was highly unlikely that poison gas had been dropped from an B-29. If the Americans had actually developed such weapon and decided to use it, they would drop in some large city where the effects would be massive. Dropping a canister or two on such a remote place wouldn't allow them to ascertain what effects the weapon had. Besides, even if you accepted the premise that poison gas had been dropped on the spot, any gas that makes children fall unconscious for 2 hours with no other lasting effects would be worthless as a military arsenal. Also, we knew that no poison gas, whether man-made or naturally occurring, would act like this, leaving no after effects whatsoever. Especially when you're dealing with children, who are more sensitive and have more delicate immune system than adults. There would have to be some after effects, particularly in the eyes or mucous membranes. We crossed off food poisoning for the same reason. So, what we were left with were psychological problems, or problems dealing with brain functions. In a case like that, standard medical methodology wouldn't help at all in isolating the cause. The effects would be invisible, something you couldn't quantify. We finally understood why we had been called here by the military to consult. We interviewed every child involved in the incident, as well as the homeroom teacher and the attending physician. Major Toyama also participated, but these interviews yielded almost nothing new. We merely confirmed what the major had already told us. The children had no memory whatsoever of the event. They saw what looked like a plane glinting high up in the sky, climbed up Owinyama, and began hunting mushrooms. Then there's a gap in time, and the next thing they recall is lying on the ground, surrounded by a group of worried-looking teachers and policemen. They felt fine, without any pain, discomfort, or nausea. The minds just felt a bit blank, as you do when you first wake up in the morning. That was all. Each child gave the same exact response. After conducting these interviews, we concluded that this was a case of mass hypnosis. From the symptoms the homeroom teacher and school doctor observed at the scene, this hypothesis makes the most sense. The regular movement of the eye, the slight lowering of the respiration, heartbeat and temperature, the lack of memory, it all fit. The teacher alone didn't lose consciousness because, for whatever reason that produced this mass hypnosis, didn't affect adults. We weren't able to pinpoint the cause, however. Generally speaking though, mass hypnotism requires two elements. First, the group must be close-knit and homogeneous, and placed in restricted circumstances. Secondly, something has to trigger the reaction, something that acts simultaneously on everyone. In this case, it might have been the glint of that airplane they saw. This is just a hypothesis, mind you. We weren't able to find any other candidates, and there may very well have been other trigger that set it off. I broached the idea of it being a case of mass hypnosis with Major Tayama, making it clear this was merely a conjecture. My two colleagues generally concurred. Coincidentally, this also happened to be indirectly related to a research topic we were investigating ourselves. That does seem to fit the evidence, Major Tayama said. After giving it some thought, this is not my field, but it would appear to be the likeliest explanation. But there's one thing I don't understand. What made them snap out of the mass hypnosis? There would have to be some sort of reverse triggering mechanism. I really don't know, I admitted. All I could do was speculate. My hypothesis was this. There's a system in place which, after a certain amount of time passes, automatically breaks the spell. Our bodies have strong defense mechanisms in place, and if an outside system takes over momentarily, once a certain amount of time has passed, it's like an alarm bell goes off, activating an emergency system that deprograms this foreign object that blocks our built-in defenses. In this case, the effects of mass hypnosis, and eliminates it. Unfortunately, I don't have the materials in front of me, so I can't quote the exact figures, but as I told Major Tayama, there have been reports of similar incidents occurring abroad. All of them are considered mysterious with no logical explanation. A large number of children lose consciousness at the same time, and several hours later wake up without memory of what happened. This incident is quite unusual. In other words, but not without precedent. One strange instance took place around 1930 in the outskirts of a small village in Devonshire, England. For no apparent reason, a group of 30 junior high students walking down the country path fell to the ground, one after the other, and lost consciousness. Several hours later, as if nothing had happened, they regained consciousness and walked back to school under their own steam. A physician examined them right away but could find nothing medically wrong. Not one of them could recall what had taken place. At the end of the last century, a similar incident occurred in Australia. Outside of Adelaide, 15 teenage girls from a private girls' school were in an outing when all of them lost consciousness and then regained it. Again, there were no injuries, no after effects. It ended up classified as a case of heat stroke. But all of them had lost consciousness and recorded at nearly the same time, and nobody showed symptoms of heat stroke. So the real cause remains mystery. Besides, it wasn't a particularly hot day when it occurred. Probably there was no other accounting for what had taken place, so they decided this was the best explanation. These cases share several things in common. They took place among a group of either young boys or girls, somewhat distant from their school, all of whom lost consciousness essentially simultaneously, and then regained it about the same time, with no one displaying any after effects. It's reported that some of the adults who happened to be with the children also lost consciousness, and some did not. Each case was different in that regard. There are other similar incidents, but these two are the best documented, and thus are representative cases, literature of this phenomena. This recent instance in Yamanashi Prefecture, however, contains one element that differentiates it from the rest, namely that one boy did not regain consciousness. This child is the key to unlocking the truth to the whole event. We returned to Tokyo after our interviews in Yamanashi and went straight to the army hospital where the boy was being cared for. The army, then, was only interested in this incident because they suspected it may have been caused by poison gas. That's my understanding, but Major Tayama would know more about this, and I suggest you ask him directly. Major Tayama was killed in Tokyo in March 1945 in the line of duty during an air raid. I'm very sorry to hear that. We lost so many promising people in the war. Eventually, though, the army concluded that this was not caused by any chemical weapons. They couldn't determine the cause, but they decided, didn't they, that it was unrelated to the war? Yes, I believe that's true. At this point, they had concluded their investigation into the matter, but the boy, Nakata, was allowed to remain in the military hospital. Since Major Toyama was personally interested in the case and had some connections there. Thus, we were able to go to the military hospital every day and take turns staying overnight to investigate the unconscious boy's case further, from a number of angles. Though unconscious, the boy's bodily functions nevertheless continued normally. He was given nutrients intravenously and discharged urine at regular intervals. He shut his eyes at night and went to sleep when he turned out the lights, then opened them again in the morning. Other than being unconscious, he appeared completely healthy. He was in a coma, but didn't dream apparently. When people dream, they exhibit characteristic eye movement and facial expressions. Your heart rate goes up as you react to the experience in your dream. But with the Nakata boy, we couldn't detect any of these indicators. His heart rate, breathing and temperature were still slightly on the low side, but surprisingly stable. It might sound strange to put it this way, but it seemed like the real Nakata had gone off somewhere, leaving behind for a time the fleshly container, which in his absence kept all his bodily functions going at the minimum level needed to preserve itself. The term spirit projection sprang to mind. Are you familiar with it? Japanese folk tales are full of this sort of thing, where the soul temporarily leaves the body and goes off a great distance to take care of some vital task and then return to reunite with the body. The sort of vengeful spirits that populate the tale of Genji may be something similar. The notion of the soul not just leaving the body at death, but assuming the will is strong enough, also being able to separate from a body of the living is probably an idea that took root in Japan in ancient times. Of course, there's no scientific proof of this, and I hesitate to even raise the idea. The practical problem that faced us was how to wake this boy from his coma and restore him to consciousness. Struggling to find a reverse trigger to undo the hypnosis, we tried everything. We brought his parents there, had them shout out his name. We tried that for several days, but there was no reaction. We tried every trick in the book, as far as hypnosis goes, clapping our hands in different ways, right in front of his face. We played music he knew, read his school books aloud to him, let him catch a whiff of his favorite foods. We even brought in his cat from home, one he was particularly fond of. We used every method we could think of to bring him back to reality, but nothing worked. About 2 weeks into this, when we'd run out of ideas and were exhausted and discouraged, the boy woke up on his own. Not because of anything we'd done. Without warning, as if the time for this had been decided in advance, he came to. Did anything out of the ordinary take place that day? Nothing worth mentioning. It was a day like any other. At 10 a.m., the nurse came to draw a blood sample right after he choked a bit, and some of the blood spilled on the sheets, not much, and they changed the sheets right away. That was about the only thing different that day. The boy woke up about a half hour after that. Out of the blue, he sat up in the bed, stretched, and looked around the room. He had regained consciousness, and medically he was perfectly fine. Soon though, we realized he had lost his entire memory. He couldn't even remember his own name, the place he lived in, his school, his parents' faces. It was all gone. He couldn't read, and wasn't even aware this was Japan or the Earth. He couldn't even fathom the concept of Japan or the Earth. He would return to this world with his mind wiped clean. The proverbial blank slate. Chapter 9. When I come to, I'm in a thick brush, lying there on the damp ground like some log. I can't see a thing. It's so dark. My head propped up by prickly brambles. I take a deep breath and smell plants and dirt and mixed in a faint whiff of dog crap. I can see the night sky through the tree branches. There's no moon or stars, but the sky is strangely bright. The clouds act as a screen, reflecting all the light from below. An ambulance wails off in the distance, grows closer, then fades away. By listening closely, I can barely catch a rumble of tires from traffic. I figure I must be in some corner of the city. I try to pull myself together and pick up the scattered jigsaw puzzle pieces of me lying all around. This is a first, I think, or is it? I had this feeling somewhere before, but when? I search my memory, but that fragile thread snaps. I close my eyes and let time pass by. With a jolt of panic, I remember my backpack. Where could I have left it? No way I can lose it. Everything I own is inside. But how am I going to find it in the dark? I try to get to my feet, but my fingers have lost all their strength. I struggle to raise my left hand. Why is it so heavy all of a sudden? And bring my watch close to my face, fixing my eyes on it. The digital numbers read 11:26, May 28. I think of my diary, May 28. Good. So I haven't lost a day. I haven't been lying here, out cold for days. At most my consciousness and I parted company for a few hours. Maybe 4, I figure. May 28. A day like any other. The exact routine. Nothing out of the ordinary. I went to the gym, then to the Komura library, did my usual workout on the machines, read Sasuke on the same sofa, had dinner near the station. The fish dinner, as I recall. Salmon, with a second helping of rice, some miso soup, and salad. After that, I don't know what happened. My left shoulder aches a little as my senses return. So does the pain. I must have bumped into something pretty hard. I rub that part with my right hand. There's no wound or swelling. Did I get hit by a car? Maybe? But my clothes aren't ripped, and the only place that hurts is that spot on my left shoulder. Probably just a bruise. I fumble around in the bushes, but all I touch are branches, hard and twisted like the hearts of bully little animals. No backpack. I go through my pant pockets. My wallet's there, thank God. Some cash is in it. The hotel key card, a phone card. Besides this, I've got a coin purse, a handkerchief, a ballpoint pen. As far as I can tell in the dark, nothing's missing. I'm wearing cream-colored chinos, a white V-neck t-shirt under a long-sleeved dungaree shirt, plus my navy blue topsiders. My cap has vanished, my New York Yankees baseball cap. I know I had it on when I left the hotel, but not now. I must have dropped it, or left it someplace, no big deal. Those are dime a dozen. Finally I locate my backpack, leaning up against the trunk of a pine tree. Why in the world would I leave it there, then scramble into this thicket, only to collapse? Where the hell am I, anyway? My memory is frozen shut. Anyway, the important thing is that I found it. I take out my mini flashlight from my side pocket and check out the contents. Nothing seems to be missing. Thank God, the sack with all my cash is there. I shoulder the backpack and step over bushes, brushing branches out of the way until I reach a small clearing. There's a narrow path there, and I follow the beam of my flashlight into a place where there's some lights. It appears to be the grounds of Shinto shrine. I've lost consciousness in a small woods behind the main shrine building. A mercury lamp on a high pole illuminates the extensive grounds, casting a kind of cold light on the inner shrine. The offering box, the votive tablets. My shadow looks weirdly long on the gravel. I find the shrine's name on the bulletin board and commit it to memory. Nobody else is around. I see a restroom nearby and go inside, and it turns out to be fairly clean. I take out my backpack and wash my face, then check out my reflection in the blurry mirror over the sink. I prepare myself for the worst, and I'm not disappointed. I look like hell. A pale face with sunken cheeks stared back at me, my neck all muddy, hair sticking out of all directions. I noticed something dark on the front of my white t-shirt, shaped sort of like a huge butterfly with wings spread. I try brushing it away, but it won't come off. I touch it and my hands come away all sticky. I need to calm down, so consciously taking my time, I slowly take off both my shirts. Under the flickering fluorescent light, I realize that this is darkish blood that seeped into the fabric. The blood's still fresh, wet, and there's lots of it. I bring it close for a sniff, but there's no smell. Some blood's been spattered on the dungaree shirt as well, but only a little, and it doesn't stand out on the dark blue material. The blood on the t-shirt is another story. Against the white background, there's no mistaking that. I wash the t-shirt in the sink. The blood mixes with water, dyeing the porcelain sink red. Though no matter how hard I scrub, the stain won't come out. I'm about to toss the shirt into the garbage can, then decide against it. If I throw it away, some other place would be better. I bring out the shirt and stow it in the plastic bag with my other rinsed out clothes, and stuff the whole thing into my backpack. I wet my hair and try to get some of the tangles out. Then I take some soap out of my toilet kit and wash my hands. They're still trembling a little, but I take my time, carefully washing between my fingers and under the fingernails. With a damp towel, I wipe away the blood that seeped into my bare chest. Then I put my dungaree shirt, button it up to my neck, and tuck it into my pants. I don't want people looking at me, so I got to look at least halfway normal. But I'm scared, and my teeth won't stop chattering. Try as I might, I can't get them to stop. I stretch out my hands and look at them. Both are shaking a bit. They look like somebody else's hands, not my own. Like a pair of little animals with a life all their own. My palms sting like I grabbed onto a hot metal bar. I rest my hands against the sink and lean forward, my head shoved against the mirror. I feel like crying, but even if I do, nobody's going to come to my rescue. Nobody. Man alive, how'd you get all that blood all over you? What the hell were you doing? But you don't remember a thing, do you? No wounds on you though. That's a relief. No real pain either, except for that throbbing in your left shoulder. So the blood's gotta be from somebody else, not you. Somebody else's blood. Anyway, you can't stay here forever. If a patrol car happens to spot you here, covered with blood, you're up a creek, my friend. Of course, going back to the hotel might not be a good idea. You don't know who might be lying in wait, ready to jump you. You can't be too careful. Looks like you've been involved in some crime, something that you don't remember. Maybe you were the perp, who knows? Lucky thing, you got all your stuff with you. You were always careful enough to lug everything you own around in that heavy backpack. Good choice. You did what's right. So, don't worry. Don't be afraid. Everything's going to work out. Because remember, you're the toughest 15-year-old on the planet, right? Get a hold of yourself. Take deep breaths and start using your head. Things will be fine. But you gotta be very careful. That's real blood we're talking about. Somebody else's blood. And we're not just talking drop or two. As we speak, I'll bet somebody's trying to track you down. Better get a move on. There's only one thing to do. One place you gotta go to. And you know where it is. I take a couple of deep breaths to calm down, then pick up my pack and get out of the restroom. I crunch along the gravel, the mercury light beating down on me, and try to get my brain in gear. Throw the switch, turn the crank, get the old thought process up and running, but it's no go. Not enough juice in the battery to get the engine to turn over. I need some place that's safe and warm, that I can escape to for a while and pull myself together. But where? The only place that comes to mind is the library, but the communal library is shut until tomorrow at 11, and I need somewhere to lie low till then. I come up with an alternative. I sit down where nobody can spot me and take the cell phone from my backpack. I check to see it's still connected, then take Sakura's phone number from my wallet and punch in the numbers. My fingers still aren't working well, and it takes a few times before I get the whole number right. I don't get her voicemail, thank God. 12 rings later, she answers. I tell her my name, Kafka Tamura. Kafka Tamura. She repeats, not exactly thrilled. Do you have any idea how late it is? I got to get up early tomorrow. I know. I'm sorry to call so late, I tell her. My voice sounds tense, but I had no choice. I'm sort of in trouble, and you're the only one I could think of. No response on the other end. Seems like she's checking my tone of voice, weighing it in her mind. Is it something serious? She finally asks. I can't tell you right now, but I think so. You got to help me, just this once. I promise I won't be a bother. She gives it some thought. Not like she's confused or anything, just thinking it over. So, where are you? I tell her the name of the shrine. Is that in Takamatsu City? I'm not totally sure, but I think so. You don't even know where you are? She says, dumbfounded. It's a long story. She lets out a sigh. Grab a cab and come to Lawson's convenience store on the corner near my apartment. They have a big sign and you can't miss it. She gives me the directions. Do you have money for a cab? I'm good, I say. Alright, she says and hangs up. I go out the tour gate at the entrance to the shrine and head for the main road to flag down a cab. It doesn't take long. I ask the driver if he knows the Lawsons on that corner, and he says he does. When I ask if it's far, he says no. About a $10 ride. The cab stops outside the Lawsons, and I pay the driver. My hands still unsteady. I pick up my backpack and go inside the store. I got there so fast, Sakura hasn't arrived yet. I buy a small carton of milk, heat it up in the microwave, and sip it slowly. The warm milk slips down my throat and calms my stomach a little. When I went inside the store, the clerk glanced at my backpack, keeping an eye out for shoplifters. But after that, nobody pays any attention to me. I stand at the magazine rack, pretending to be picking one out, and check out my reflection in the window. Though my hair's still a bit of a mess, you can barely see the blood on my dungaree shirt. If anybody noticed, they would think it was just a stain. Now all I have to do is stop trembling. 10 minutes later, Sakura strolls in. It's nearly 1 a.m. She has on a plain gray sweatshirt and faded jeans. Her hair's in a ponytail and she's wearing a navy blue New Balance cap. The moment I spot her, my teeth finally stop chattering. She sides up beside me and looks me over carefully, like she's checking out the teeth of some dog she's about to buy. She lets out a sound halfway between a sigh and actual words, then slightly pats me twice on the shoulder. Come on, she says. Her apartment is 2 blocks away from Lawson's, a tacky 2-story building. She walks upstairs, takes the keys out of her pocket, and opens the green paneled door. The apartment consists of 2 rooms, plus a kitchen and a bathroom. The walls are thin, the floors creak, and probably the only natural light the place gets during the day is when the blinding sunset shines in. I hear a toilet flush in some other unit, the scrape of a cabinet being shut somewhere. Seedy, alright, but at least it has the feel of real people living real lives. Dishes piled up in the kitchen sink, empty plastic bottles, half-read magazines, past their prime potted tulips, a shopping list taped to the fridge. Stockings hanging over the back of a chair, newspaper on the table open to the TV schedule, an ashtray, a thin box of Virginia Slims. For some strange reason, this scene relaxes me. This is my friend's apartment, she explains. She used to work with me at a salon in Tokyo, but last year she had to come back to Takamatsu, where she's from. But then she said she wanted to travel to India for a month and asked me to watch the place. I'm taking over her job while she's gone. She's a hairdresser too. I figured it's a good change of pace to get out of Tokyo for a while. She's one of those new age types, so I doubt she'll be able to pull herself away from India in a month. She has me sit down at a dining table and brings me a can of Pepsi from the fridge. No glass though. Normally I don't drink colas. Way too sweet and bad for your teeth. But I'm dying of thirst and down the whole can. You want anything to eat? All I got is a cup noodle, if that'll do. I'm okay, I tell her. You look awful. You know that? I nod. So, what happened? I wish I knew. You have no idea what happened. You didn't even know where you were. And it's a long story, she says, pinning down the facts. But you're definitely in trouble. Definitely, I reply. I hope that at least gets through. Silence, all the while. She's bathing me in a deep frown. You don't really have any relatives in Takamatsu, do you? You ran away from home. Again, I nod. Once. When I was your age, I ran away from home. I think I understand what you're going through. That's why I gave you my cell phone number. I figured it might come in handy. I really appreciate it, I say. I lived in Ichikawa, in Chiba. I never got along with my parents and hated school, so I stole some money from my folks and took off. Tried to get as far away as I could. I was 16. I got as far as Apashiri, up in Hokkaido. I stopped by a farm I happened to see and asked them to let me work there. I'll do anything, I told them, and I'll work hard. I don't need any pay, as long as there's roof over my head and you feed me. The lady there was nice to me, had me sit down and have some tea. Just wait here, she said. The next thing I knew, the patrol car pulled up outside and the police were hauling me back home. This wasn't the first time the lady had gone through this sort of thing. The thought hit me hard then that I had to learn a trade. So no matter where I went, I could always find work. So I quit high school, went to a trade school, and became a hairdresser. The edges of her lips rise a bit in a faint smile. A pretty sound approach to things, don't you think? I agree with her. Hey, would you tell me the whole story from the beginning? She says, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. I don't think I'm going to get much more sleep tonight, so I might as well hear it all. I explain everything to her. From the time I left home. I leave out the human part though. That, I know, I can't tell just anyone. Chapter 10. Is it alright then, if Nakara calls you Kawamura? He repeated the question to the striped brown cat, enunciating his words slowly, making it as easy to understand as he could. This particular cat had said he thought he had run across Goma, the missing 1-year-old tortoiseshell, in this vicinity, but from Nakara's viewpoint, he spoke very strangely. The feeling was mutual, for the cat seemed to be having its own problems following him. Their conversation was at cross purposes. I don't mind at all, the tallest of heads. Pardon me? But Nakara doesn't understand what you're saying. Forgive me, but I'm not so bright. It's a tuna, to the very end. Are you perhaps saying you'd like to eat a tuna? No, the hand's tied up before. Nakata never went into these conversations with cats expecting to be able to easily communicate everything. You have to anticipate a few problems when cats and humans try to speak with each other. And there was another factor to consider. Nakata's own basic problem with talking not just with cats, but also with people. His easy conversation with Otsuka the previous week was more the exception than rule, for invariably getting across even a simple message took a great deal of effort. On bad days, it was more like two people on the opposite shores of a canal yelling to each other on a windy day. And today was one of those days. He wasn't sure why, but striped brown cats were the hardest to get on the same wavelength with. With black cats, things mostly went well. Communicating with Siamese cats was the easiest of all. But unfortunately, there weren't too many stray Siamese wandering the streets, so the chance didn't present itself often. Siamese were mainly kept at home, well taken care of. And for some reason, striped brown cats made up bulk of the strays. Even knowing what to expect, Nakara found Kawamura impossible to decipher. He enunciated his words poorly and Nakara couldn't catch what each one meant, or the connection between them. What the cat said came off sounding more like riddles than sentences. Still, Nakara was infinitely patient and had plenty of time on his hand. He repeated the same question over and over, having the cat repeat his responses. The two of them were seated on a boundary stone, marking a little park for children in a residential area. They'd been talking for nearly an hour, going round and round in circles. Kawamura is just a name I will call you. It doesn't mean anything. Nakara gives names to each cat, so it's easy to remember. It won't cause you any problems, I guarantee it. I would just like to call you that, if you don't mind. In response, Kawamura kept muttering something incomprehensible, and seeing as how this wasn't likely to stop anytime soon, Nakata interrupted, trying to move their talk along by showing Kawamura the photo of Goma once more. Mr. Kawamura, this is Goma, the cat that Nakata is looking for, a 1-year-old tortoiseshell cat. She's owned by the Koizumis of the Three-Chom neighborhood in Nagata, who lost track of her a while back. Mrs. Koizumi opened the window and the cat leaped out and ran away. So once more I would like to ask you, have you seen this cat? Kawamura gazed at the photograph again and nodded. If it's Tuna, Kawamura, tied up, try to find. I'm sorry, but as I said a moment ago, Nakata is not very bright and can't understand very well what you're getting at. Would you mind repeating that? If it's Tuna, Kawamura, try to find, and tied it up. By tuna, you mean the fish? Twice the tuna, tie it, Kawamura. Nakata rubbed his closely cropped salt and pepper hair and puzzled this over. What could he possibly do to solve this tuna riddle and escape from the maze the conversation had become? No matter how much he put his mind to it, however, he was clueless. Puzzling things out logically, after all, wasn't exactly his forte. Totally blind to it all, Kawamura lifted a rear leg and gave the spot just below his chin a good scratch. Just then, Nakata thought he heard a small laugh behind him. He turned and saw, seated on a low concrete wall next to the house, a lovely, slim Siamese looking at him with narrowed eyes. Excuse me, would you by chance be Mr. Nakata? The Siamese purred. Yes, that's correct. My name's Nakata. It's very nice to meet you. Likewise, I'm sure, the Siamese replied. It's been cloudy since this morning, but I don't expect we'll be seeing any rain soon, Nakata said. I do hope rain holds off. The Siamese was a female, just approaching middle age. She proudly held her tail up straight and had a collar with a name tag. She had pleasant features and was slim, with not an ounce of extra fat. Please call me Mimi, the Mimi from La Baume. There's a song about her too. Si mi chiamano Mimi. I see, Nakata said, not really following. An opera by Puccini, you know? My owner happens to be a great fan of opera, Mimi said, and smiled amiably. I would sing it out for you, but unfortunately, I'm not much of a singer. Nakata is very happy to meet you, Mimi-san. Same for me, Mr. Nakata. Do you live near here? Yes, in that 2-story house over there, the Tanabe's house, you see, right? The one with the cream-colored BMW 530 parked in front? I see, Nakata repeated. He had no idea what a BMW was, but he did spot a cream-colored car. That must be what she meant. Mr. Nakata, Mimi said, I'm known as self-reliant, or perhaps you'd say a very private sort of cat, and I don't normally interfere in others' affairs. But that youngster, the one I believe you're referring to as Kawamura, is not what I would call the brightest kitty in the litter. When he was still young, a child hit him with his bicycle, the poor thing, and he struck his head against some concrete. Ever since then, he hasn't made much sense. So, even if you're patient with him, as I see you've been, you won't get anywhere. I've been watching for a while, and I'm afraid I couldn't just sit idly by. I know it's forward of me to do so, but I had to say something. No, please don't think that. I'm very happy you told me. Nakata's as dumb as Kawamura, I'm afraid, and can't get by without other people's help. That's why I get a subsidy from the governor every month. So I'm very happy to hear your opinion, Mimi. I take it you're looking for a cat, Mimi said. I wasn't eavesdropping, mind you, but just happened to overhear you as I was taking a nap here. Goma, I believe you said the name was? Yes, that's correct. And Kawamura has seen Goma? That's what he told me, but Nakara can't figure out what he said after that. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Nakara, why don't I step in and try to talk with him? It's easier for two cats to communicate, and I'm fairly used to the way he talks, so why don't I sound him out and summarize it for you? That would be very helpful, I'm sure. The Siamese nodded lightly, and like a ballet dancer, nimbly leaped down from the concrete wall. The black-tail held up high like a flagstaff. She leisurely walked over and sat down beside Kawamura. He immediately began to sniff Mimi's rump, but the Siamese gave him a swift blow to the cheek, and the younger cat shrank back. With barely a pause, Mimi dealt him another blow to the nose. Now pay attention, you brainless dingbat, you stinky good-for-nothing, Mimi hissed. Then turned to Nakara. You got to show him who's in charge up front, or you'll never get anywhere. Otherwise he'll go all spacey on you, and all you get is drivel. It's not his fault he's this way, and I do feel sorry for him. But what are you going to do? I see, Nakara said, not all sure what he was agreeing to. The two cats began conversing, but they spoke so quickly and softly that Nakara wasn't able to catch any of it. Mimi grilled Kawamura in a sharp tone, the younger cat replying timidly. Any hesitation got him another merciless slap to the face. This Siamese cat was clever and educated too. Nakara had met many cats up till this point, but never before one who listened to opera and knew models of cars. Impressed, he watched as Mimi went about her business with a brisk efficiency. Once Mimi had heard everything she wanted to, she chased the younger cat off. Be on your way, she said sharply, and he dejectedly slunk away. Mimi affably nestled up into Nakara's lap. I think I got the gist of it. Much obliged, Nakara said. That cat, Kawamura, said he's seen Goma several times in a grassy spot just down the road. It's an empty lot they were planning to build on. A real estate firm bought up a car company's part warehouse and tore it down, planning to put up a high-class condo. As citizens' movements opposed the development, there was a legal battle and the construction has been put on hold. The sort of thing that happens all the time these days. The lot is overgrown with grass, and people hardly ever come there, so it's the perfect hangout for all the strays in the neighborhood. I don't keep company with many cats, and I don't want to get fleas, so I hardly ever go over there. As you're no doubt aware, fleas are like a bad habit, awfully hard to get rid of once you get them. I see, Nakara said. He told me the cat's just like the one in the photograph, a timid, pretty young tortoiseshell with a flea collar. Can't seem to speak that well either. It's clear to anyone that it's a naive house cat that can't find its way back home. When was it, I wonder? The last time he saw the cat seems to be 3 or 4 days ago. He's not very bright, so he's not even sure about days. But he did say it was the day after it rained, so I'm thinking it must have been Monday. I seem to recall it rained pretty hard on Sunday. Nakara doesn't know about the days of the week, but I think it did rain around then. He hasn't seen her since? That was the last time. The other cats haven't seen her either, he says. He's a spacey, good-for-nothing cat, but I pressed him closely and believe most of what he says. I really want to thank you. No need. It was my pleasure. Most of the time, I have only this worthless bunch of cats around here to talk to, and we never seem to agree on anything. I find it incredibly irritating, so it's a breath of fresh air to be able to talk with a sensible human, such as yourself. I see, Nakara said. There's one thing Nakara still doesn't understand. Mr. Kawamura kept going about tuna, and I was wondering if he meant the fish? Mimi lightly lifted her left front leg, inspecting the pink flesh of the pad, and chuckled. The youngster's terminology isn't very extensive, I'm afraid. Terminology? The number of words he's familiar with is limited, is what I'm saying. So, for him, everything that's good to eat is tuna. For him, tuna is the cream de la creme, as far as food goes. He doesn't know there are such things as sea bream, halibut, or yellowtail. Nakara cleared his throat. Actually, Nakara is very fond of tuna. Of course, I like eel as well. I'm fond of eel myself, though it's not sort of thing you can eat all the time. That's true, you couldn't eat it all the time. The two of them were silent for a time, eel musing, filling the passing moments. Anyway, what that cat was getting at is this, Mimi said, as if suddenly remembering. Not long after the neighborhood, the cat began hanging out at that vacant lot. A bad person showed up who catches cats. The other cats believe this man may have taken Goma away. The man lures them with something good to eat, then throws them inside a large sack. The man is quite skilled at catching cats, and a hungry innocent cat like Goma would easily fall into his trap. Even the stray cats who live around here, normally a very bunch, have lost a couple of their number to this man. It's simply hideous, because nothing could be worse for a cat than to be stuffed inside a bag. I see, Nakara said, and again rubbed his salt and pepper hair with his palm. But what does this man do with the cats once he's caught them? That I don't know. In the old days they used to make shamisen out of cat skin, but nowadays not too many people play shamisen. And besides, I heard they mainly use plastic now. In some parts of the world, people eat cats, though not in Japan, thank goodness. So I think we can exclude both of these as motives. Which leaves, let me say, people who use cats in scientific experiments. Cats are used a lot in experiments. One of my friends, in fact, was used in a psychology experiment at Tokyo University. A terrible thing, but it's a long story and I won't go into it now. There are also perverts, not many mind you, who just enjoy tormenting cats. Catching a cat and chopping off its tail, for instance. What do they do after they chop it off? Nothing. They just want to torment and hurt the cats. Makes them feel good for some reason. I'm afraid there are twisted people like that in the world. Nakara gave this some thought. How could chopping off a cat's tail possibly be fun? So what you're saying is that maybe this twisted person has taken Goma away? He asked. Mimi screwed up her long white whiskers and frowned. I would rather not think that, or even imagine it, but it is a possibility. Mr. Nakara, I haven't lived all that many years, but I've seen terrible things I never could have imagined. Most people look at cats and think, what a life. All we do is lie around in the sun, never having to lift a finger. But cats' lives aren't that idyllic. Cats are powerless, weak little creatures that endure easily. We don't have shells like turtles, nor wings like birds. We can't burrow into the ground like moles or change colors like chameleon. The world has no idea how many cats are injured every day. How many of us meet a miserable end? I happen to be lucky enough to live with the Tenebes in a warm and friendly family. The children treat me well, and I got everything I need. But even my life isn't always easy. When it comes to strays though, they have a very tough time of it. You're really smart, aren't you, Mimi? Nakara said, impressed by Saime's eloquence. No, not really, Mimi replied, narrowing her eyes in embarrassment. I just spend too much time lying in front of the TV, and this is what happens. My head gets full of worthless facts. Do you ever watch TV, Mr. Nakara? No, Nakara doesn't watch TV. People on TV talk too fast, and I can't keep up with them. I'm dumb, so I can't read, and if you can't read, TV doesn't make much sense. Sometimes I listen to the radio, but they are also too fast, and it tires me out. I much prefer doing this. Enjoy talking with a cat outside, under the sky. Indeed, Mimi said. That's right, Nakara replied. I really hope that Goma is alright. Mimi, Nakara is going to have to look at that empty lot. According to the youngster, this man is very tall and wears a strange tall hat and long leather boots. And he walks fast. He looks very unusual, so you'll recognize him right away, he told me. Whenever the cats that gather at the empty lot see him coming, they scatter in all directions. But a newcomer might not know enough to... Nakara stored this information away in his hand, carefully folding it all the way in the front drawer so he doesn't forget it. The man is very tall and wears a strange tall hat and long leather boots. I hope I've been of help, Mimi said. Nakara appreciates everything you've done. If you hadn't been kind enough to speak up, I would still be going round and round about tuna. I'm grateful. What I think, Mimi said, gazing up at Nakara with knit brows, is that man is trouble, a lot of trouble. He's more dangerous than you can ever imagine. If it were me, I would never go near that lot. But you're human, and it's your job after all. But I hope you'll take every precaution. Thank you very kindly. I'll be as careful as I can. Mr. Nakara, this world is a terribly violent place, and nobody can escape the violence. Please keep that in mind. You can't be too cautious. The same holds true for cats and human beings. I'll remember that, Nakara replied. But he had no idea where and how the world could be violent. The world was full of things Nakara couldn't comprehend, and most things connected with violence fell into that category. After saying goodbye to Mimi, he went to see the empty lot, which turned out to be about the size of a small playground, a tall plywood fence with a sign on it saying, "Keep out, site of future construction," which Nakara naturally couldn't read. A heavy chain blocked the entrance, but around the back was a gap in the fence, and he easily got inside. Someone must have pried it open. All the warehouses that had originally stood there had been torn down, but the land hadn't been graded for construction and was covered with grass. Goldenrod grew as high as a child. A couple of butterflies flickering above it. Mounds of earth had hardened in the rain. In some places, rising up in little hillocks, a perfect place for cats. People wouldn't come in, and there were all sorts of little creatures to catch and plenty of places to hide. Kawamura was nowhere to be seen. Two scrawny cats with rough coats were there. But when Nakara called out a friendly greeting, they just glanced at him coldly and disappeared into the weeds. Which made sense. None of them wanted to get caught and have his tail chopped off. Nakara himself certainly didn't want to have that happen to him. Not that he had a tail. It was no wonder the cats were wary of him. Nakara stood on higher ground and took a good look around. No one else was there, just the butterflies, searching for something, fluttering above the weeds. He found a good spot to sit down, lowered his canvas bag from his shoulder, took out 2 bean jam buns, and had his usual lunch. He drank hot tea from a thermos. Eyes narrowed as he quietly sipped. Just a quiet early afternoon. Everything was at rest, placed, harmonious. Nakara found it hard to believe that somebody might be lying in wait to torment and torture cats. He rubbed his cropped salt and pepper hair as he chewed. If somebody else was with him, he could explain. Nakara's not very bright. But unfortunately, he was alone. All he could do was nod a few times to himself and continue chewing. Once he finished the buns, he folded up the cellophane they'd been wrapped in into a compact square and put it in his bag. He screwed the lid back on the thermos tight and put it in his bag as well. The sky was covered with a layer of clouds, but their color, he could tell the sun was almost directly overhead. The man is very tall and wears a strange tall hat and long leather boots. Nakara tried to picture this man, but had no idea what the strange tall hat and long leather boots looked like. In his whole life, he would never encountered any tall hats and long leather boots. Kawamura had told Mimi that you'd know him when you saw him, so Nakara decided, I suppose I'll just have to wait until I see him. That's definitely the best plan. He stood up and relieved himself in the weeds, a long, honest pee, then went over to a clump of weeds in the corner of the vacant lot where he had the best chance of remaining hidden from sight, and sat out the rest of the afternoon, waiting for that strange man to show up. Waiting was a boring task. He had no clue where the man might next appear. Maybe tomorrow, maybe not for a week. Or maybe he would never show up again. There was that possibility. But Nakara was used to aimless waiting and spending time alone, doing nothing. He wasn't bothered in the least. Time wasn't the main issue for him. He didn't even own a watch. Nakara operated on his own sense of time. In the morning, it got light. In the evening, sunset, and it got dark. Once it got dark, he would go to the nearby public bath, and after coming home from his bath, he would go to sleep. The public bath was closed on certain days of the week, and when that happened, he would just give up and go back home. His stomach told him when it was time to eat, and when the time came for him to go pick up his subsidy, somebody was always nice enough to tell him when that day was near. He knew another month had passed. The next day he would always go for a haircut at the local barber shop. Every summer, someone from the ward office would treat him to a eel, and every new year they would bring him rice cakes. Nakara let his body relax, switched off his mind, allowing things to flow through him. This was natural for him, something he had done ever since he was a child, without a second thought. Before long, the borders of his consciousness fluttered around, just like the butterflies. Beyond these borders lay a dark abyss. Occasionally, his consciousness would fly over the border and hover over that dizzying black crevice. But Nakara wasn't afraid of the darkness, or how deep it was, and why should he be? That bottomless world of darkness, that weighty silence and chaos, was an old friend, a part of him already. Nakara understood this well. In that world, there was no writing, no days of the week, no scary governor, no opera, no BMWs, no scissors, no tall hats. On the other hand, there was also no delicious eel, no tasty bean jam buns. Everything is there, but there are no parts. Since there are no parts, there is no need to replace one thing with another, no need to remove anything or add anything. You don't have to think about difficult things. Just let yourself soak it all in. For Nakara, nothing could be better. Occasionally, he dozed off. Even when he slept though, his senses, ever vigilant, kept watch over the vacant lot. If something happened, if somebody came, he could wake up and do what needed to be done. The sky was covered with a flat line of grey clouds, but at least it wasn't going to rain. The cats all knew it, and so did Nakara.